First, we're going to invite Ramón Espinasa to give his presentation. Ramón Espinasa is from Venezuela, and he's currently the lead oil and gas specialist at the Inter-American Development Bank, as well as a lecturer in Georgetown University. Before joining the IADB, he was a consultant for the World Bank and for the Andean Development Corporation. And before that, for 7 years, he was chief economist of PDVSA, which is Petróleos de Venezuela, the state-owned oil company. And he holds a PhD in energy economics from the University of Cambridge. And he's teaching a postgraduate seminar on hemispheric energy security. So without further ado, let's give Mr. Ramón Espinasa a warm welcome.
Thank you, Emilio. I should start by thanking the group Latin America Matters from the Harris School of Public Policy and the Organization of Latin American Studies at the University of Chicago and the International House for their kind invitation. I want particularly to thank Daniel Pereira. Without him, I wouldn't be here today. He made sure I was going to be here. I have been working in this sort of analysis for some 5 years now. I presented the first version of this paper at a meeting in January 2008 at the OAS, the Organization of American States, and I have been refining the ideas. The basic argument is that Latin American countries have reacted differently to the big changes in the oil market development over the last 25 or 20 years, since the mid-90s. Around 2002, the world petroleum market experienced a structural change. There was a quantum leap in the price level, and that, to my understanding, is irreversible. Prices increased roughly fourfold from the average of the previous century. Prices in real terms were around $25, went up to close to 100, and they remain at that level. The reason for that is, from the demand side, the incorporation of the Asian demand, and that's still to come in large numbers. And from the supply side, the moving to marginal production areas, the tar sands, the shale oil, and the subsalt in Brazil. Then, for any oil-producing country that is small enough to be price taker, the rational, and without barriers to investment and production, the rational response would have been to permanently increase production, given there is no restriction on the reserve base. However, this was not the case in Latin America. Out of the 7 largest producers, 3 reacted positively and increased production, capacity and production, Brazil, Colombia, and Peru, and 4, far from increasing production, have reduced production over or since the early 2000s. Those are Mexico, Venezuela, Ecuador, and Argentina. I will present these facts and then argue that the basic reason for that different reaction falls in the realm of institutions and incentives to invest and produce oil. And that's the agenda. First, I will define what I understand by oil sector performance, then look at the evidence of the structural change in the price dynamics, then look at these 7 countries and how they have reacted in terms of investment and production, and then I go into the institutions. First, look at the idiosyncratic character of contracting in oil production, and then looking at these 7 countries, what is their institutional framework and the consequences for reacting to these market signals to reach some conclusions. Then first, what I understand by price signals. In oil, as in the production of any other good or service, investment in the long run should react to price signals and eventually lead, in the case of a positive signal, to increase in supply, otherwise a reduction in supply. This is as far as there is free mobility of capital and labor, as you study very much in this university. We should expect this for the oil price, since there has been a structural change in prices that I will be looking at next. This has not been the case. Then for oil, as different from mining activities in general, we have a very good proxy, because finding figures on investment is not easy. But we have a very good proxy for oil investment, and that's the number of active drilling rigs. Out of my experience, I work at PDVSA for 20 years. You know that roughly 85% of the company budget goes to hiring or buying drilling rigs. Then the number of drilling rigs is an excellent proxy for investment. You drill wells not just for increasing capacity, but mainly to maintain capacity, because it's an exhaustible natural resource. Then I'll be talking about that. But then we have a proxy for investment. Then prices. This is the WTI, the real price up to roughly 8 months ago. Then you see there a change around the half of the first 5 years of this decade. And actually, this price of around, this one you see here, was the same price on average for the 20th century. Then we see here a structural change. We tested that econometrically, and it shows. This is the same price in semi-logs filtered by the Hodrick-Prescott filter, and you see here an inflection point. The second derivative becomes negative, and here we're in a different price regime as we were here. There is a structural change. Then not just the actual increase in prices between 2002 and 2007, but prices have remained roughly at the same level. And it already has lasted for 10 years, and it can be perceived as a permanent quantum leap in the price level. Then next, which should be the response to this price signal. We have in Latin America 2 groups of countries I already mentioned. Group 1 didn't react at all, or paradoxically decreased production. Group 2 increased capacity. And next, I'm going to show the evidence for that. This is Argentina. This is the number of active drilling rigs. Didn't increase on average, actually, after the change. And bear in mind something I just mentioned, that if the number of prices in very old oil provinces, as these are, very mature provinces, to maintain production, you have even to increase investment, because there is a natural process of exhausting the reservoirs. Then for maintaining production with very few wells in a very young reservoir, you produce X number. As the reservoir is exhausted, you have to drill ever more wells to produce or to recover secondary oil. That was not the case in Argentina. The increase came and didn't increase the number of drilling rigs. This is the same graph as before, but the trended with the filter. This is Ecuador, the same, didn't increase. After a maximum reach, just increased capacity with low prices and didn't keep increasing capacity with the high prices. What happened there? This is Mexico. And paradoxically enough, reduced production as prices were to peak. And I'm going to discuss this particular case, and what happened around 2006 in the case of Mexico, but hasn't increased capacity either. And this is the case of Venezuela. A big drop here when the strike, but never recovered to the previous level. Experts say to maintain a capacity of around 3 million barrels per day in Venezuela, you need to have active, on average, around 100 drilling rigs. You're well below that, and that's the reason why production in Venezuela is falling. Then look what happened in the other 3 countries with regards to investment, as measured by drilling rigs. This is Brazil, increased 4-fold with prices, the number of drilling rigs. This is the same curve trended. This is Colombia, the most striking one, increased the number of drilling rigs almost 7-fold in the period. And this is Peru, at a lower level of rigs, but also responded to the price signal. And then we have these index numbers. The blue is the group 2 countries, the red is the group 1. Then these responded to the price signal, these countries did not. And this will help for finding out best practices. Then we just analyze this, let's go into the supply. Look what happened to production of crude oil in Argentina. From around 850,000 barrels of oil in 2002 at the inflection point, down to just above 600,000, a drop of more than 1/3, no, of around 1/4 production in Argentina. This is the trended, and compared, this is the price going up, and paradoxically, production coming down. This is Ecuador, and don't be misled by this sharp increase here. This is, in this period, was built a pipeline by the private sector, actually, that increased 2-fold the transport capacity between the jungle and the ports and the coast. It's called the Oleoducto de Crudo Pesado, the heavy crude oil pipeline, built by the private sector. But once that production that was there came on stream, actually fell with prices. This is Ecuador, production coming down as prices went up. This is Mexico. Production has fallen from around 3.8 down to below 3 million barrels per day. And finally, this is Venezuela. This is an anomaly also, it's a strike. This is February 2003. But even after that, and particularly the last 3 years, production as a trend has come down. Now it's around 2.6, it's around this level. And this is Venezuela. The red line is production, the blue line is the price. What happened to production in the countries that perform well, by our definition of good performance? This is Brazil production, increased by more than 1/3. The red line is production. This is Colombia, increased almost 2-fold from bottom levels some 5 years ago, and this is increases over the last 5 years, from 550 close to 1 million barrels per day. And this is Peru. This includes the liquids out of gas production. That's why they jump. But look, when prices go to the highest level, so does production in Peru also. Look at the trend. Then, this is the empirical side of it, or the evidence, the numbers. Production increase, prices increased 4-fold. However, the countries in the region reacted differently. Some countries, the group 1 countries, drilling activity as proxy for investment did not increase, and oil production fell. In group 2 countries, drilling activity increased on average 3-fold, and production increased 2.5 times. Then we have this same price signal, different reactions, and this would come The answer to this would come as a fact for a student at Chicago. Institutions. Institutions matter. And the set of institutions is what, as an incentive for investment, is what has made the difference between these two groups of countries. And in the second part of the presentation, I'm aiming at showing at that. Group 1 countries, when you think of it, show very similar, a point before, contracting for oil production. It's very complex contracting for a number of reasons. And that's why investment is that hard to come by. First, the investment is very large for any standards. You're talking about investment in the oil sector in Mexico in the order of $15, $20 billion, so is in Brazil, or half that in Colombia, the same in Venezuela. It's large, it's made upfront at the beginning, and is very asset specific. You cannot use those wells, not even for producing water afterwards. And the recovery periods are very long, then have to be made at the beginning, high investments, long recovery periods. There are geological risks. Sometimes you spend $20 million drilling one well and comes dry. Then in our countries, investment is quite asymmetric between a sovereign state, powerful state, which is the resource owner, and there is no way of escaping that. The mines and the oil reservoirs belong to the states on Earth, but in the private lands in the US. Then all mining and oil contracts are made between producing operators, private or public, and the state owner of the resources. And there are rents, and that means tensions, distributive tensions. Profits are more larger than costs have been. Not that much now, but it's falling because it's very Ricardian sort of production, and we're moving towards the worst lands with higher production costs. But those economic rents create distributive tensions between the owner, the government, and the companies. Then what does this, and there is always the peril, the possibility of these tensions leading to expropriation in case there is no agreement between the two parties. This means that investing in oil requires long-lasting contracts, requires credibility that the rules of the game are not to be changed during the process of those contracts, requires some degree of security against the possibility of expropriation, and particularly requires credible institutions. Then, which are the features of these countries? And this comes out of inspection. In all countries in Group 1, production is under direct government control, either through a state-owned company that keeps monopoly of production. That's the case of Pemex in Mexico, PDVSA in Venezuela, Petroecuador in Ecuador, or indirect, as it was the case in Argentina. Heavy involvement of government, particularly since after 2005, on the operation of private companies, leading to expropriation and state monopoly control of production some 3 months ago. That means, and it's the case in these countries, that there is huge discretion on the distribution of reserves and revenue. It's the government decides. And that exposes the companies, even if they are state-owned companies, openly to rent-seeking behavior by government. And they're permanently expropriated, even if they are state-owned companies. The management in more countries, more than in others, is under political scrutiny, is close to competition, and there is huge operational and financial opacity and lack of public scrutiny. And the state-owned company is forced to perform non-inherent tasks, building roads, maintaining hospitals and schools, or building houses or supermarkets or a number of other activities. And this also varies among countries, but this is a common feature. And perhaps most important, the companies are forced to subsidize domestic fuel supply. And in all these 4 countries, the domestic fuel market is subsidized. The consequences for that, and I'll go fast because it's essentially the same from the side of the company, there is permanent expropriation of revenues, either through subsidies, non-oil-related activities, and discretionary distribution. Then the company is left without savings to invest. There is uncertainty regarding revenues and savings, and it's very difficult to undertake multi-year investment, which is the name of the game in investment projects in the oil sector. There is no response to market signals, no behavior as commercial firm, lack of competition, etc. And these changes, and this is key what I'm going to say now, in the period under analysis, these 20 years from the mid-1990s up to now, we have had institutional changes in all these countries, and those changes have taken place associated with changes in the group in government. This is the production curve in Argentina, and this is the swearing in of Nestor Kirchner. His wife is at present the president of Argentina. And they change drastically the rules of the game prevailing here. They set ceilings much below international prices for domestic hydrocarbon products, gas and gasoline. They stop exporting of gas and force the companies to sell at very low prices, with sometimes at a loss to the domestic market, and limited the volumes of exports and created a special tax on oil exports. That created a huge disincentive to invest, and eventually this led around here to the expropriation of YPF. This is Ecuador and the swearing in of Rafael Correa. 3 issues here. He put huge pressure on private companies operating in marginal fields. The first measure was to stop them the possibility of drilling below an horizontal, on a horizon of 10,000 feet, where there was a possibility of finding large reserves in their territories. They were forbidding of doing that, and they stopped investing. And then they put special taxes on production by the private companies, and eventually they stopped investing. They created the condition, the private, Petroecuador didn't increase production in this period. This was essentially private investment, and that explains the downfall. This is a not easy case to explain, and, but there is a reason. If you look at the drilling activity in Mexico, there was a sharp drop after, at the start in 2007. The reason for that is as part of a comprehensive financial program by the President Calderon. They put ceilings to the capacity of the public sector to take debt. A good deal of the increase in Pemex in this period was through a special purpose mechanism called pideregas, that without sacrificing transfers to the central government and acquiring debt, Pemex was able to invest ever-growing amounts out of debt. And the debt of pideregas went from nil to 100 to somewhere around $100 billion. That financing mechanism came to an end, and that forced in the short run Pemex to stop investing as measured by drilling rigs. Also came the collapse of production in the Gulf of Campeche reservoirs. And this is Venezuela. I could speak for 3 hours about what happened here. But mainly is the PDVSA lost. PDVSA was being run as a state-owned company under private law. It was a Sociedad Anónima, an LLC, and the relationship was at arm's length between a very professional management and the government. That came to an end here, and there was increasing interference from government into PDVSA management and operations. Eventually, that led to a strike, and two-thirds of the most skilled people left the company in December 2002, January 2003, and then PDVSA has been forced to undertake a number of non-oil related activities, and that a good deal explains. These are just the summary of what I said, the reasons for the collapse of production, not again in the realm of geology, but on the realm of institutions. This is just what I said. This is Mexico. And then we go into group 2, and I'll go rather fast here. The big difference and the common feature of these countries as compared to the others is that the government retains the monopoly of ownership of reserves, but does not produce the reserves itself, but through a non-operating hydrocarbon agency, and this is the Norwegian model. This is a non-hydrocarbon agency. This is ANP, Agencia Nacional de Petróleo in Brazil, ANH, Agencia Nacional de Hidrocarburos in Colombia, and Peru Petro in Peru. It's common to the 3 countries. Then the agency administers the oil-bearing lands and opens these lands to competition. It's awarded to the best offer by companies that can be national, foreign, private, and state-owned. None of the 3 countries relinquish ownership of their own state-owned company, but they were the main beneficiaries in ways I'm going to just explain. It's exposed to signals, and the distribution and operational rules set in the contracts are respected. The state-owned company perhaps has been the main beneficiary of this because it is protected as it is under the same set of rules as the private oil companies. It's not subject to discretionary government intervention, is focused on its related activities, and is subject to competition and public scrutiny. And that a good deal explains the success of Petrobras, Ecopetrol, and Petroperú. There is either no subsidy, there is no subsidy to the domestic market in Colombia and Peru, and if there is any in Brazil, it's assumed by government, not Petrobras, and the reserves are not in jeopardy because they belong to the regulatory agency and not to the state-owned company. These are the consequences. The ANH acts as a buffer. Then it is a technical buffer between government with political intentions and the producing companies, and production is under the control of the companies subject to the contractual guidelines. It's subject to public scrutiny. Petrobras and Ecopetrol are publicly traded, and thus they are open to scrutiny by shareholders. And again, it's under the same rule, and this is the evidence. This is ANP was created in August '97 by Fernando Enrique Cardoso, who was sworn in '95. Look at the response. And the 2 governments afterwards, Lula and Dilma Rousseff, have not messed with this. They are thinking of that for the development of the pre-salt, but the model has been very successful. Brazil was copied the Norwegian model. This is the most striking case. Colombia copied the Brazilian model. This is the swearing in of President Uribe in August 2002, and less than a year later, he created Agencia Nacional de Hidrocarburos, liberating Ecopetrol of that heavy toll, and this is the recovery. And Peru Petro, which is a regulatory agency in Peru, was created in '93 out of the period of analysis, and President Fujimori was sworn in 1990. These are the new policies: creation of AMP and partial privatization of Petrobras. In Colombia, the same, and Peru. And to me, that is the basic conclusion. We have done, and there is a paper that we just finished, sent it to the editors yesterday, with the econometric, more hard analysis of this. But these are the conclusions. We have had this experiment over the last 20 years in Latin America, a sharp increase in the price of oil, but countries reacted differently. And to me, the main reason for that, again, has not to do with geology, but on how the state organizes itself to develop the reserves. In Group 1 countries, government monopoly of control, discretion, huge discretion by government on the distribution of revenue and the operational rules, and those countries are closed and not responded to any price signal. And in the other countries, there is competition under this regulatory agency. There is respect for contractual distribution and operational rules, and it's open and responsive to international price signals. And with that, I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ramon, for that very thorough and scientific presentation. When I was studying my presentations for this forum, I was very pleased to see that we were going to have two very complementary presentations. Now that we have Mr. Bueno Torio give his side of the energy policy, it's a more political side. Mr. Juan Bueno Torio has had a long political career in Mexico. He's currently a congressman in the House of Representatives, where he's also secretary of the Energy Committee. Previously, he was a senator for 6 years, where he was also secretary of the Foreign Relations Committee. And before that, he was CEO of Pemex Refinery, which is the also state-owned oil company in Mexico. And before that, he was Undersecretary of Small and Medium Enterprises at the Secretary of Economy in Mexico. And he holds a BA in Business Administration from the largest university in Mexico, which is the National Autonomous University. And so let's give him a round of applause, please.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate, and it's a great honor to be here with you in this forum to make policies in Latin America. I believe that this is a strong budget that we are going to face in the next few months in Mexico, talking about energy. I would like to present this speech in Spanish because I'm not so good to speak in English. So if you allowed me, I would appreciate if somebody can translate when I'm saying. I will try to do most of the time in English, but if I'm not able to, I will go in Spanish. So I'll apologize for that to you. As you know, in Mexico, we, as we have been talking around many times, in Latin America, we have a lot of resources in energy. These resources are in many things, for electricity or for hydrocarbons technology. We have in Argentina, we have here Argentina, Brazil, Peru, Ecuador, Venezuela, and Mexico, of course. And in Mexico, and in Latin America, there is a lot of opportunities in this sector of the economy. There are opportunities to invest, and it will become in more jobs for the people in those countries because there's a lack of jobs, particularly in Mexico, that we have a lot of young people without finding any good job to start their lives. We have developed in Mexico our energy through two main companies owned by the state. We have two monopolies. It's Pemex, very well known for everybody who is involved in this matter, and Comisión Federal de Electricidad, which provides the electricity to all the country. But we, as a country based on two monopolies, we have several problems in the development of this energy. These monopolies, they are inefficient and they are losing a lot of money every year. So we have to change our reality in Mexico, and we are trying to do a new policy in energy. We have to go through to break a paradigm that we have since 1938, that the government took the oil companies from the owners and they start develop a national company. We have to change that, and it's very difficult because it becomes a political and social problem. Everybody in Mexico knows that the oil is for the Mexicans, and the Pemex is a proud company, a company which we are proud of it, and we want to, many people want that this status never change. And as we have seen now in the presentation of Ramon, in Mexico we have a lack of investment in energy, so we need to improve new politicals, new law to change the reality and increase the energy, the production of energy in Mexico. And what is the main thing that we have to do that? It's because we are importing now, as we are a crude oil producer, and we export oil, we import also the 45% of gasolines that we are consuming in our internal market. We import the 30% of the gas we need for the industry in Mexico. And we also are importing in the north border electricity from the United States. So that's the thing that we have to change now. We have in Mexico the raw material, which is the crude, and we have in Mexico the market. So we are giving this market to others in other countries through the companies that are supplying all our needs. So that's why I want to share with you some of the things that we are thinking and now we are placing in the discussions and the debates in Mexico, in the Congress and outside the Congress, just to build this policy, this public policy that has to change our reality and give us the opportunity to develop the energy in Mexico as we need, and to take advantage that all this investment could be developed the economy regionally in Mexico, because it's one of the needs in the country to give jobs and make prosperity for everyone in all places. One of the main objectives that we have is to go out of the group number one that Ramon mentioned in his presentation. We have to go out in that group because the government and the the companies owned by the government, they don't have the capability, enough capability in human resources, and they don't have also enough capability in economic resources. They depend on the budget of the country and never is or always is not enough the money that they receive to implement their investment. We need that in Mexico we have enough energy and to have security in this supply. We have problems in that matter in all the country, problems that they have made, for instance, in the metropolitan area, Mexico City and the state of Mexico in the center of the country. We don't have enough electricity to place new companies because we have a lack of production. So we need that some others, instead of the companies of the state, comes to invest and develop all this energy. We have to guarantee the sustainability in the sector because now, as you have seen, we are decreasing in our production and we are attending our internal market with imports. And we have to put the human being in the center of this policy. Why? Because now many of the problems that we are facing in Mexico, is because we have never put in the center of this kind of policy, the energy, to the people. And now there are places in Mexico they don't have electricity, or they have to move 100, 200 kilometers to get gasoline, or there are places that they don't have gas for the homes, for their houses. And that's one of the things that we have to complain. The quality in the products and the electricity and the gasoline and everything, the service to provide them with opportunity, and the price. We have, for instance, in Mexico, 32 kinds of tariffs to charge you the electricity. So it's a problem that we cannot handle anymore because the subsidies are increasing and these subsidies are not going to where the needs are in the people. We need that the citizens in Mexico has access to the energy, and we need that the people in Mexico and the industry in Mexico pay as they spend less in electricity. The scope of an energy policy that we are trying to do is that the needs be socially sustainable. I won't read everything because you can read it better than me. So I just pointed that we have to be more competitive in our companies inside Mexico. Now we have these two companies. Pemex, for instance, is the 8th or 9th oil company in the world, but it's only working inside Mexico. This is not a company that goes out Mexico to increase their profits or take advantage of the technologies they have developed in their own desarrollo. I would like to say also that we need to increase the research and investigation in Mexico. Now, everything that we do there is done by international companies who own the technology, and we have not developed. Even that we have an institute to develop and research in Mexico about the energy and in electricity and petroleum, it has been not enough. for the company, so we have to increase that also. And in this policy, as we depend on the 38% or 35% of the budget in our country, it comes from the petroleum, so we have to make also a fiscal reform besides this energy reform, because the oil is supporting in the 38% of the public finances in Mexico. As I mentioned, that is a political issue. Ahí está. ¿Y ahora qué pasó? Ahora no camina. As I mentioned, that is a political issue, and there is a confusion in Mexico who owns the oil. We have been told for all our lives that the oil is owned by the Mexicans, and we have never seen any barrel of oil or profit directly in our pockets. But what we need is now that the oil to be a good key for more investment and for development and more fiscal product to our government or to our budget. We need to establish and make a good distinguish between the property, the operators, who will get the finance benefit, and how much we are going to get as a country of this increase in production in oil in the country. As we are thinking in this new and these changes that we want to do in our constitution and in almost 18 to 20 laws that depends on that, we want to establish that the states needs to have all the possibilities in his hands to exploit our resources and be able to supply to the country and satisfy all the needs that we have. Now we have, we need to strengthen Pemex in order to give have a company that can compete with others. If we are able to do the constitutional changes that we are willing to do in Mexico, we need to give now a cooperative government to itself. We have to give them autonomy in everything that they can do. Now, if Pemex wants to do a business with Petrobras, for instance, they cannot do that because the law, they don't allow that. If they want to share technology with other company in order to be or avoid some risk, Pemex cannot make it. And even though if they want to invest in some new project or in a new plant, they cannot do it. They can't do it because they have to go through the treasury in the country. ¿Cómo es la Secretaría de Hacienda? ¿Cómo es
The Treasury.
The Treasury to get the authorization to make the investment. So they lose a lot of time. For instance, we decided in Mexico to build a new refinery in 2007. 2007. They bought the land, 1,000 hectares. 5 years later, we just have the wall around the land. So it's very slow, all the investments that we are doing in that matter in Mexico. So we have to change it so Pemex can go to the market to look for more investors to go with it. And also we want to do that other companies can come to Mexico to invest in the sector. Well, I'm sorry for my English, but I think it's faster this way if we are waiting to translate everything. It's okay? Thank you very much for your kindness. Now we are facing this huge problem in Mexico. We have to change it from the paradigm that we are coming, that everything is owned by the state, and the people in Mexico thinks that if we change that, we are traitors of the country, we are going against the sovereignty of the country, and that's the political matter that we have to change, and we have to support to do our best effort in the Congress to change the reality of this. We are trying to change in electricity, that the private companies can go to invest in generating and transmitting the electricity and the distribution in the cities or in the communities that we have in the country. And we have to make in this, we have to take out from the Comisión Federal de Electricidad, which is the energy company, we have to take out the dispatch of the energy, because they control that. We have to take out from them this control, and to take out from them also the transmission of the energy in the whole country. So that's what we have to do, and for that we have to change our law, and even though we have to change the Constitution, and that's one of the main problems that we will have to face that. And we have to study also the subsidies and focalize these subsidies where the needs are, and not just as we are doing now. We have to think about in the future of the nuclear energy. In Mexico, we just have one plant with 2 generators, and we have the capacity to increase that in several times what we are doing now, but it's also a political problem as usual in many countries. Thinking and talking in Pemex, we have to consolidate the government, corporative government in Pemex. The other things that I mentioned we have a problems also in the transparency and the accountability in Pemex. There's a lack of confidence where all the operation in that company. We don't have a labor productivity, and Pemex has a very strong weight about the pension sistema de pensiones, ¿cómo es?
Pension system.
Pension system. And we have to develop more the human capabilities in the self-industry, because they have a lot of people that can increase the productivity in the country. And now we have to think also with the fiscal regime that it's Pemex involved, because now Pemex has not enough money from its own to make the investment that they need. We have to decide, building this public policy, what is going to do Pemex by itself and what can be done by others. So that's one of the main debates that we are going to have in that. We have to develop the shale gas. We have known about 1 year ago that our reserves in shale gas are enough for more than 80 years. So we don't have the technology for that, and we don't have enough money to invest in develop those fields. So there is an opportunity for new investors to come there, but we have to change our constitution and we have to change the law. In refinery, we also have problems. I mentioned in the beginning that we are importing about the 45% of the gasoline that we consume in Mexico. We are not so fast to build the refineries, so that's the questions that we have to do ourselves. Do we stand on the shoulders of Pemex to support the development in Mexico, the energy, or we open the investment to privates to do this faster? We need in Mexico more than 3 or 4 refineries to support the internal market. And there is a possibility that private companies comes to do that. We have to do also with some other kind of energy to develop for the automotive consumption. And we have also to discuss who is going to do the transport of the gas, of the gasoline or diesel or turbocine in all the country. Itself Pemex, or we can open to privates that they make new investment and support this. We have problems in Mexico. Now we are transporting many products from the petroleum by car. In all Mexico you can see pipes, motor cars transporting as dangerous it is, the gasoline and many products because we don't have pipelines in all the country. And we don't have the pipelines because we are not able to invest in them because the treasury don't give the money to Pemex to make the investments. And there is also a huge opportunity in Mexico for the new investment in the petrochemical products. Now it's owned by the government, the beginning of the chain of the petrochemicals. We are trying to change that in order that the privates can come to invest in the shale gas, and all the gas they get, they could be able to use it in the chain of the petrochemical. So we can increase the investment there, and with this reform totally, we think we can increase annually more than 2% of the GDP in the country. That's that's one of the main things that we are facing in the near 2 or 3 months. We expect to have this reform between September and December and be able to develop a new area of investment in our country. We have to strengthen also our institutions that we have in the energy, and we have to strengthen also our law to take care of the climate change, that it's one of the matters that we are trying to see in this new reform. I hope that I have been enough, my explanation, my talk has been enough to you, but I hope your questions are going to open more discussion about this matter. Thank you very much for your attention, and also I apologize for my English. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bueno. You mentioned that the Mexicans have not received any of Mexico's oil, but I have in my house one of those little glass boxes with a drop of oil that I got when I was a child and the school took us to Pemex. So, you know, I got my share of oil a long time ago. So I have a couple of questions here that I'm going to mix with what I did, what I prepared last night. And the first one is that, as you all recall, in 2008, Cemex, which is the cement company from Mexico, was expropriated in Venezuela by Chavez. And last year, President Fernandez expropriated Iberdrola. YPF, which was the branch of oil that was previously owned by Repsol, and then also President Evo Morales expropriated Iberdrola, which is the Spanish company that's mostly dedicated to wind power. So aside from bad luck from the Spanish, it seems to be they're having a hard time, not just in their own country but around the world. How can Europe, which is the largest producer of renewable energies, be invited to invest once again in Latin America as they face this risk of uncertainty regarding their investments?
Is there risk? They are investing in Chile, huge amounts in renewable energy in northern Chile, in solar energy. They are investing in Peru. They are investing in Central America. Nicaragua, with paradoxically enough, in Nicaragua, the private sector in the energy sector is large. Then they have to choose where to invest and where not to invest, on the one hand, and on the other, they can take the Cemex took the expropriation case to the World Bank against Venezuela. I'm pretty certain Repsol is doing the same against Argentina. Venezuela has, I believe, 53 cases open. And the Institute for Settlement of Disputes at the World Bank open, starting with a huge demand by ExxonMobil and ConocoPhillips. Then the companies can react to that, but they have to choose the country. Yes, yes. You take a risk.
Well, thank you, Mr.
Okay, you said what has to happen for them to return, change the institutional framework, and it will take time. Because it's not just changing on a paper the institutional framework, is making institutions credible, and that will take much longer. And I'm living through that in first person. It's very difficult, very easy to destroy. Extremely easy. You destroy from one day to the next. You expropriate. You announce it on May 1st. You expropriate. Create is very difficult. Then to recover from what has been done in these countries you mentioned will take time. To recover international trust in these countries, private sector trust in these countries will take time, but it will happen.
Hopefully that will be the case. Mr. Bueno, feel free to jump in the question.
Well, can also... it's one of the things that we are willing to do in Mexico. Now we have a lot of resources in the Gulf of Mexico unexplored. So we need the companion of the new companies, the companies that they already are doing that in other places in the world, to share their technology, to share the risk with Pemex, and that's why we are trying to strengthen the institutions in Mexico. This is what we are trying to do with this reform that we are now debating. the institutions that can guarantee the companies that come to invest in Mexico, they will take their reasonable profits, and they can do their business as well as in any part of the world.
Well, this brings us very nicely into our next question, because we've been mostly talking about oil. And so another question, which is also some concern shared by the people here today, seems to be that the future is set for renewable energy, and oil being the current resource in Latin America. But since the Industrial Revolution, the US, England, and pretty much all the continents, all the countries in Europe have been used to base their economic growth on the exploitation of coal and oil. So it seems kind of unfair to ask countries like Mexico or Venezuela or China to seize their economic growth base on oil, given that 200 years of exploitation of oil resources in other countries were the ones that fueled this economic growth. So the question is, how can emerging economies cease to rely on what has been historically the main source of energy, given that this energy has, for example, impulsed China to grow 8% every year? I'm thinking about the Kyoto Agreement, for example, or the Doha Round.
I have a strong position in that regard. Okay. If the future belongs to renewables, it's the very, very long future, the very, very distant future. I don't know whether you know this figure, but 53% of electricity in this country is produced out of coal. 90% of electricity in China is produced out of coal. Renewables out of the primary supply of energy in the US represent less than 2%, excluding hydro, the non-traditional renewables. It's 0.4 geothermal and 0.7 or so combined wind and solar. Then the supply of energy, the worldwide supply of energy in the future, and by that I mean the next 2 or 3 generations, then we shall be dead by then, as Keynes said. And I know that naming Keynes in Chicago is not, it's not the best you can do. But in that regard, he was right. We shall be dead in the long run. Then the world will keep depending on fossil fuels for its supply of energy in generations to come. And to self-impose the development of our large reserves under those concerns is a huge mistake. And now I will say something that you like me to say in this university: let the market decide. And if you open these countries to private investment in the development of these kinds of energies, with all the risks that I put in that slide on how difficult is contracting for hydrocarbons and mineral resources, they will come. And in that regard, I agree very much with President Uribe. In this new worldwide distribution of labor, whereby you have research and development and services in the US and Europe, you have the manufacturing moving to Asia, China and India, then the role to play and the comparative advantage of Latin America in that framework, this is very schematic, but it's in the supply of primary resources, minerals, energy, and food. And we have a role to play there. then no, let's take advantage of that. I tell you, if you open the Gulf of Mexico under fair conditions, you will have more companies coming than you think of. You know that. Just for the sake of curiosity, those of you that have the chance, look at an industrial map of the Gulf of Mexico. The border between the U.S. and Mexico on the water is a straight line coming perpendicular to Rio Grande. North of that line, there is huge activity, drilling rigs, and nothing at the south of that straight line. Then I don't believe the geology stops in one line. You see, there are other conditions for that happening. Then don't be pessimistic, Emilio. And then we have a future in that.
All right, I'll see your Keynes and I'll raise you my Gary Becker by saying incentives matter. So there you go.
Okay.
And Mr. Bueno, I believe this question is more on your field as a politician.
Let me say something.
Okay.
Just according to the Gulf of Mexico. Yes, that's one of the budgets that we have. In the north of the border, in the Gulf of Mexico, we have more than 2,500 wells. And in Mexico, below the line, we have 5 in the whole Gulf of Mexico. So that's a huge opportunity to invest and to share risk and to share profits and everything. And for Mexico, it's going to be a very good thing because we will increase our income for the fiscal the fiscal budget in the country. And I think if in this question, if it's fair or not fair, that we have the opportunity to develop all that possibilities. I think we have to do that, but with ambience responsibility, and we have to explore and exploit for ourselves this richness. Is not going to be easy that in the world everybody can get the energy through the renewable energy. It's expensive, and it will take time to develop the technology that we can use easier this kind of energy.
Perhaps to solve that problem, I'm going to introduce this next question, which is regarding public-private partnerships. The premise here is that in Brazil, they have implemented some protectionist policies requiring companies that invest in energy to have a local partner, a national partner company. And in a broad sense, the question asks, what is your view on that? Do public-private partnerships have a future? Is this requirement to have a local associate too harsh, or is it flexible enough?
I think that it's one of the objectives that we have to pursue. If we are going to create development with our resources in energy, we have also to make a partnership with the companies that have the technology and the capital and the capabilities to share this with the local companies, because then you are getting a better development of the country, and that's why that is one of the main budgets that we will have. Yes.
Okay, then. Another question, which is also on your area, you being a Mexican and me also being a Mexican, I'm biased towards this question, so my apologies for that, is was the 2007 energy reform successful? Have we seen any changes? Can we expect any changes?
Yes, it was in 2008, the reform. It took us more than 8 months in discussion, and it was not enough. We didn't reach what we were willing to get, and that's why we are talking about a new reform that goes to the end, not part by part, as we did in 2008.
Very good. Pedro, if you can just pick a question from those that you have there.
Easy one.
Okay. Nothing is easy in the University of Chicago, I have to say that.
All right, so someone's curious about what are the main challenges Group 1 countries face to recover the time lost, especially knowing the difficulties of reopening, I don't know, something about the oil wells.
Again?
Yeah, okay, so especially knowing the difficulties of reopening damaged oil wells, what are the main challenges Group 1 countries face to recover the time lost?
Yeah, talking about Chicago, and I guess modesty must be very cheap here because there is plenty full of supply. Am I right?
Perhaps, yes.
Okay. No? It will take time. We made a calculation for Venezuela. You know, you're Pedro? Pedro. There are two time horizons for this. One is reality, and the other is the change in perceptions. Perceptions can change very rapidly and create wealth because you will be investing huge amounts and creating employment. But before output comes from that investment will take time. Then we have to talk, you know, there are all these expectations about the development of the pre-salt in Brazil, and not a single dollar has been invested yet, you know. It will take 10 years before a barrel comes out of that. Then in the case of the Group 1 countries, making a credible first announcement will change immediately the expectations, but it will take time to recover the lost production. I'm back to what I said. Production in Venezuela has fallen by roughly 1 million barrels over the last 14 years per day. That's roughly 1/3 of the production. To recover to where we were 10 years ago or 14 years ago will take no less than 10 years because we have never grown in production faster than increasing capacity by 150,000 barrels per day per year. Then it will take time. But the investment required to recover production will create, in very Keynesian terms, huge growth. Okay, then it's those two.
Maybe we have time for one last question, so Pedro, pick a good one.
So in terms of the politics of oil, when you're talking about privatization, there's a bunch of questions about how to deal with the unions, the syndicates, and the potential rent seekers.
Well, that's part of the problem. The union, for instance, that leads the contract in Pemex, they don't like changes. So that's one of the main things that we are facing now. I think that the actual government, they are having talks with them in order to change the pension system because it's very heavy for the company. Now Pemex owe more for pensions that finance lends. So that big is the problem for the pensions in Mexico. The privatization in some other companies, what we are talking about is that to privatize is not inside Pemex. What we are trying to do, or at least in our minds, in the PAN party, we are trying to strengthen Pemex, make a better company in order that it's able to face the competition, and open the investment to other companies to do the same than Pemex, but increase the production in Mexico to help the country to develop the energy, not to help Pemex. Because I mentioned in my presentation, the oil is not from Pemex. It's not owned by Pemex. It's owned by the country. So we have to have companies, instruments from the state that do the same thing than Pemex and increase our production. And the unions, they have to go with it. They will be able to ask for the contracts to the new investors, and they will compete with other unions for the best proposals. That's it.
Let me make a final point, if I may, in favor of Mexico. I mean, the energy sector, and the oil sector in particular, is an anomaly in the Mexican economic setting. That's a very market-oriented economy, you see. And we're talking, that's why for me it's not easy to place Mexico in Group 1, although it belongs to Group 1. But it's something they decided some in 38, whatever, more than 70, 75 years ago. And when you change that, as it will imply a constitutional change, I believe, it will have immediate credibility. Then Mexico will be going ahead of the rest of these countries, because the country as a whole is to put it quotes and quotes, is a serious country. Then you have that advantage, I believe. It's my opinion.
Well, thank you, Mr. Espinasa and Mr. Bueno, for coming to our humble university. Let's give them an applause.